But the story, and Shmuley, you're going to remember this as soon as I start telling it. Shmuley was racing up High Street. And by the way, Oxford is the most, I don't want to say anti-Jewish bastion, but when you're walking through a town that has colleges named Corpus Christi and Christ Church, seeing somebody
and
like,
Jesus.
And Jesus, of course.
He's a Jewish guy.
He was a Jewish guy, carpenter. Shmuley stuck out, let's just say, quite obviously. So he's running down the street, and suddenly he has this guy screaming at him, "Hey, Rabbi, Rabbi!" And he turns around and he sees a drunken Rastafarian screaming to stop him. And Shmuley's late, he doesn't know what to do. And the guy goes, "No, I want to speak to you." And he looks at Shmuley in his drunkenness. He goes, "I'm a Jew, you're a Jew." And I guess Rastafarians think of themselves as lost tribes. Is that right?
That's right.
And so Shmuley goes, "Well, okay." He goes, "And it's my birthday today." And Shmuley looks at him and he goes, "But I have one question on my birthday. Do you believe in Jesus Christ?" And Shmuley looks at him and goes, "Oh God, here we go." And he goes, "Do I believe that the man existed?" "No, do you believe he's the Son of God?" And Shmuley goes, "No, I don't." And he goes, "I'm a Jew." And he goes, "Well, I'm a Jew too." And he starts getting angry. And he goes, "What if God came down and told you that Jesus was the Son?" And Shmuley said, "Well, I would tell God you're wrong." So now the guy his name was Slim.
Slim, that's
Slim.
right.
He introduced himself as Slim. And so now Slim is angry, furious, and he looks at him and he starts screaming, "You're no Jew! You're no Jew!" He wheels around in a drunken mess and starts walking away from Shmuley. Now I had been counseling Shmuley. You have to understand, Shmuley is my friend. Andy Tish is my rabbi. I am Shmuley's rabbi, even though we've now agreed that I will be studying with him on a weekly basis. But I always counsel him to try to live the values that he so eloquently preaches and talks about every Friday night. And he'd been having some trouble with the local Chabad, right? And a lot of conflicts with local Chabad because he had a very obviously non-Jewish guy at the head of a Chabad house. And eventually you were forced in a sort of ignominious chapter to leave. You were no longer the Sliach for the Rebbe in Oxford. So it was tough times were going on in your life at this time and through your relationship with me. But the powerful moment for me was Slim starts walking away from him, and Shmuley screams out after standing there furious, fuming, and then he makes a choice, and he screams out for Slim. He goes, "Hey, Slim!" And Slim turns around and he goes, "Slim, happy birthday, happy birthday." And all of a sudden the anger in the guy's face drains out, and he runs over and gives Shmuley the kind of bear hug you saw me give him today. And Shmuley, when he recounted the story at the Shabbat dinner that he was very late for, I had to begin services without him. Shmuley then tells one of the most moving recounts of this story. Like what he said to me was going back to this idea of Abraham. And he really said that life is a reflecting, as what Abraham said, is that it shines back at you what you send out. And my worry today about life, really, about my country, the salvation of my country is simply this, is people have begun to think that America, and let's forget America, let's not make this about countries, because obviously the focus of this conference is Israel. People think that democracy is a spectator sport, and it absolutely is not. It's not about us sitting back on our couches with our remote controls, whether saying who's up, who's down, who got the last in or not. We have a participatory democracy. And all of us here, especially blacks and Jews, we drink from wells that we did not dig. We eat luxuriously from fruits from the trees of other people's, planted by other people. We eat bountifully from a harvest from soil that we did not till or sow. So we who are the inheritors of this legacy have an obligation. We could gaze into the world with passivity, or we could become the kind of shadow of our ancestors. Now this to me is an issue for me every day in New York, because I constantly am challenging people to show the only thing necessary, as I said, for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And we have evil in this world. And I spoke about Ahmadinejad, but that to me, Shmuley and I talked about this, to see Elie Wiesel, the winner of a Nobel Peace Prize, get up there and rightfully show his rage and intolerance for such hatred, shows you what I believe that we have to meet the evils that challenge us with. But it necessitates an activism that sometimes I worry we don't have enough of. And I see it in America. I always say the biggest poverty we have to worry about is not a material poverty. It's a poverty of action, a poverty of love, a poverty of compassion. And so what I've been demanding from people, and trying my best to live up to the courage of other Americans and other believers in democracy. And the best example I can give with this, and then I'll be silent, is when people told me what I should be satisfied with. Now, that's the worst thing you can do with me. Tell me something's impossible, or tell me that I should be settled for something that I'm doing. And so in 2007, we were 5% down on murders and about 20% down on shootings. And people told me, Mayor, that's incredible progress. When I knew that people in my community, still having 100 people murdered in my city, which is like having hundreds of people in New York City, probably equates to about 1,000 people probably murdered, if my math is correct, in New York. Now, I looked around and said, this is our problem. Forgive me for talking about tolerance in my speech, but maybe seemingly contradicting myself, is we need to be intolerant. Or why are we settling for what the realities are? Why don't we recognize that we have the ability to do something about it? So I decided to try to do a little shock treatment. And what I did at the beginning of 2008, after having in January 2007, was the bloodiest month of that year, is I hung a big sign up where I live, and I said, we're taking back January. I said, for God, for country, and for each other. And then I asked the gentleman, Alex Reed, standing behind you, who's trying to look mean, but he's actually a softie. You know, security is supposed to look mean, but he's actually a really nice guy. I asked my security detail to volunteer time at night away from their families and their communities. And we got in the car and drove around Newark, New Jersey between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. in the morning. And we went around and stopped men. First of all, we stopped police officers. And by the way, if you're a young black man who's been pulled over a lot in his life in his early years, you take great pleasure to pull over police officers. So I lit my lights and sirens on and pull over police officers. And we would pull their log sheets and say, what are you doing out here? Are you going to be reactive in life, which is what most Americans, I think, too many Americans do, I shouldn't say most, certainly not most, but too many Americans do. Or are you going to understand what our philosophy is in crime fighting in Newark, so we're proactive. We're not going to respond to crime, we're going to stop crime before it happens. And then I started fixing them in their role. You're in the front lines of the fight for this democracy. Some people believe that terror will reign in our communities. Some people believe that we can take back our neighborhoods. What do you believe? What will you do? Then my team decided to go out and start doing traffic stops ourselves. In the month of January alone, these guys here, they recovered 4 guns off the city's streets just by pulling people over. They would always pull somebody over, they'd look back and say, Mayor, stay in the car. Most of the time I would listen to them. And the times I didn't, God has a way of wreaking his punishment. One time, we actually caught a stolen car. It was trying to elude us. We were able to pin it. We literally drove up on its hood, pinned it, and this car thieves fled from the car. All my guys, they didn't give me the warning. They didn't say, Mayor, stay in the car. They just opened doors and ran. Suddenly, somewhere in my brain, a 19-year-old Stanford football player trigger went off. I opened up the door, sprinted out, 2 inches from grabbing the car thief, and my hamstring decided to remind me that I was 39 years old, and it popped, and I fell to the ground. But this was our winter of last year, going around the city, shaking people up. I remember one day we drove up on a drug trade. The drugs went in the air, guys ran through backyards, we ran after them. They caught them. Now that the people were captured, I could get out of the car, but we had to find the drugs, so I'm on my belly in this neighborhood, searching for drugs in the backyard. And lights start going on at homes. People start coming into their backyards and saying, Mr. Mayor, what are you doing? And of course I looked up confidently at them and told them, I'm looking for drugs. But this was our year, and by the time February hit, Newark, New Jersey found themselves in the midst of the longest stretch since 1961 without a murder. 41 days we went with a stretch without murder. By the time we reached the first quarter, we were down 70% in murders. I was getting strep throat, stomach viruses, but we kept on doing this around the clock policing to try to shock people into what could happen. And now we're on pace to set the modern record for the least amount of murders in our city's history, even though we just had a very tragic weekend. So I say all this to say that I'm a big believer in what Gandhi said. You've got to be the change you want to see in the world. That there's a wonderful theologian from the Christian tradition that says, everywhere you go, you must preach the gospel, but only sometimes should you use words. And so here we are in this savage world. And many people, I hear this sense of resignation as they were with crime in Newark, that, oh, this Israeli conflict is going to go on for God knows how long. It doesn't have to be that way.